How's it going this week, everybody? This week I'm going to be having a woman on that had some very interesting experiences with some type of sleep paralysis demon. It's very interesting and has some aspects of mimicry in it. It's definitely a little disturbing, but I think you all will definitely enjoy this episode. Also, just wanted to do a quick shout out to everyone that's been signing up for the membership. I do appreciate it. If you are interested in the membership, you can head over to challengetheunknown.com and get early access to new episodes. And one last thing before we get started tonight is this episode is sponsored by Smoky Mountain Squash Coffee Company. Nathan sent me over the Cowboy Blend to try, and I'm very impressed with the quality and flavor. As many of you know, I'm a huge coffee drinker, and just for my audience, there's a 10% discount code. If you follow the link in the description and use code CTU at checkout, you'll get a great discount and know that you're not only supporting the show, but you're also supporting Bigfoot research, as a portion of their profits go into researching the mysterious creature. Thanks for listening.
So from the beginning, we were streaming. I had walked into one of my fiance's streams. Some sort of feeling actually kind of came over me, right? It was this intense vibration and fear. It just kind of took hold of me, and I recognized it immediately as sleep paralysis. I was like, oh, okay, this is no big deal. Let me kind of get out of it. I was kind of screaming, kind of getting out of it, though, as a kind of like a unconscious move. But I woke up with the muffled screams. My fiance kind of looked at me a little bit, and when I woke up, I heard a voice, a male voice, kind of distant, and it was screaming, get out of my head. And just, it felt like, this person was super in distress. I actually kind of thought it was one of my roommates initially, so I actually went ahead and I messaged in the group chat to see if anybody was awake maybe and they had a bad dream, trying to brush it off, that kind of thing too. I also want to mention that I did actually see some red kind of misty orbs outside of my own window before falling asleep that night. And that's going to be important later. Essentially, once I heard that voice, though, of distress, and kind of talked it over with my fiance, we all both figured, okay, well, we don't know who it is. We're just going to go back to sleep. So he falls asleep first, then I'm second. As I'm falling back asleep in this half asleep state, I start hearing the screaming again. And it's the same exact way. It's the same exact scream, and it's the same exact words. But this time, it's my fiance's voice, screaming like this. So I just something in me just kind of wakes up in the astral, right? And it's the astral because it looks a little bit different than when you're actually awake. And I just see my fiance just kind of rising up slowly from the floor in front of our door. And, he's shaking, vibrating, screaming still, because whatever has him, in fear like that still kind of has a hold of him. So I immediately reach out and I call his name and go to grab him in the astral. And we both wake up really instantly. I just kind of let him know, hey, things okay, what happened? I heard you screaming. And he was like, thanks for waking me up. We didn't really understand why he was screaming like that all of a sudden until I asked him, hey, what happened? I heard screaming. You were saying this. And he was like, oh, yeah, I actually found out where the screaming was coming from. So I went to go investigate it. And he told me that he went downstairs and he actually heard one of the downstairs neighbors, one of the male downstairs neighbors, screaming that, get out of my head. And he went to go touch the man, and that's when he started screaming. He actually looked over to the window and saw those glowing red orbs through the window. Like they were just completely drawn to them and they were terrorized by these orbs. And then, of course, he floats back up, trying to get some help back from me, and that's when I saw him, and that's when all that happened. So, me and my fiance talked about this for a minute, and we're like, oh my gosh, how can we help? This guy's obviously having either, some sort of like attack or like maybe like a nightmare, right? Maybe he's afraid of that. But I didn't get any sense that it was a negative entity per se. When I first saw it, before we went to sleep, I just kind of, ignored it and did whatever. But after we had talked about it, we decided just to kind of send some, I guess, positive vibes downstairs. And it sounded like he calmed down, but I also did kind of hear, while he was still sleeping, I guess, in the distance, it sounded like, it sounded very cartoonish in nature, but almost very alien. I heard some voices, like multiple voices. So it wasn't this man's voice anymore. It was like this different, disembodied voice that I also heard coming from the same location. And I don't know exactly what they said. It was very muffled to me, or it was in a different language. I'm not entirely sure. But it didn't seem real from how I guess cartoony the voice sounded. Like, how like they use different voice synthesizers? It's kind of like that.
Yeah, it's distorted.
Yeah, very distorted.
Okay.
And I just didn't understand it. After that, we stayed up. We weren't able to calm down because after feeling all that, these man's emotions of fear and the sleep paralysis that he wasn't able to break on his own, that kind of thing, that we had then experienced through our own selves, one after the other, we just were not able to go back to sleep after that. But it seemed like he was fine and everything. I do think that sleep paralysis demon, the form that I saw anyways, the two red glowing orbs, to me I saw it in a more misty form. My fiance kind of saw it a little bit more defined and orbish, kind of like two very large glowing orby eyes is what it kind of felt like. But they kind of didn't always match up, if that makes sense. I don't know if they were either way. But that's essentially what we saw and what we had experienced.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hear a lot about the sleep paralysis entities or whatever you want to call them. I've had sleep paralysis. I've never hallucinated from it before. My sleep schedule's really not that great. So sleep paralysis isn't super foreign to me. It's not common anymore, but it still happens from time to time, I would say. But I've never hallucinated from it, and I know people that have had the quote-unquote hallucinations where they see the Hat Man and stuff like that, but, the orb thing is very interesting to me, and the color of it is very interesting. So what do you think this entity is that you guys came into contact with, and do you think it was attached to your neighbor?
I think if it really was an entity, I personally got a sense that it was an entity, but not a negative one. I think that, I don't know exactly what it was, but I do know that my neighbor saw it and he was terrified of it. So people say all the time that these entities, if you are afraid of them in any way, they will feed off of that fear to kind of keep you there and potentially keep you in that sleep paralysis state so you feel defenseless.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So what do you think these entities are? If you had to guess, do you think that they're human? Do you think they exist in different light spectrums? How do you think all this works?
I don't think that they're human. I think they may be on a different realm than what we're used to as humans, for sure. If anything, there's definitely different frequencies, right?
Right.
A lot of our emotions are vibrations, I guess, frequencies that we can pick up on, and these things can pick up on it too. There's these lower, I guess, dimensional or vibrational beings that, feed off of this stuff just because they can.
Yeah, it's very possible, and that goes into the whole idea of poltergeists and stuff that feed off of people, so to speak. It makes you wonder what whatever you encountered was doing. It definitely sounds like it was, had some type of relationship there where it was benefiting somehow. It's very disturbing, whenever I hear about, like mimicry and stuff, because you mentioned the voice that sounded like your husband, which is, it's always really creepy to hear about stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like coming out of him, and it seemed like he was experiencing the same thing I did, where we were both kind of just experiencing exactly what our neighbor was downstairs. We were just kind of living through it, but we knew it wasn't our own feelings or our own.
Yeah, it's very interesting, but we're getting close to the end of our time slot here. Are there any other details you want to add before we wrap things up here?
I would just say, if possible, if you ever encounter any sleep paralysis demons or hallucinations, try not to be afraid, or try to be a different kind of emotion. Like, you can be angry that they're bothering you, bothering your sleep, or just a different thing other than fear or negativity, because that seems to be what draws them in.
100%. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on. That was a great story. I think that the audience is really into a lot of the sleep paralysis stuff, and I think they'll definitely like hearing your story. But thanks again for coming on, and we'll be in touch.